Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 15th, 2023 Grants Pass City Council meeting. And we start our meetings with a moment of silence, so please join me for that. Please rise for the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have counselors, it looks like De La Grange and Pell are absent tonight. Do we have anyone on the phone? No. Okay. We have a proclamation to make. Whereas more than 50 years after the passage of the Equal Pay Act and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, women continue to suffer the consequences of inequitable pay differentials. And whereas, according to statistics released by the U.S. Census Bureau, year-round full-time working women in 2022 earned only 84% of the earnings of year-round full-time working men, indicating little change or progress in pay equity. And whereas higher education is not free from wage discrimination, according to a U.S. Department of Education analysis, reporting that after controlling for rank and credentials, field of study, and other factors, full-time faculty members earn nearly 9% less than their male counterparts. And whereas fair pay equity policies can be implemented simply and without undue costs or hardships in both the public and private sectors, and whereas fair pay strengthens the security of families today while enhancing the American economy, whereas March 14th, 2023 symbolized how far into the year the average median woman had to work in order to have earned what the average median man had earned the entire previous year. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Sarah Bristol, Mayor of the City of Grants Pass, do hereby proclaim March 15th, 2023 as Equal Pay Day in Grants Pass, and urge the citizens of Grants Pass to recognize the full value of women's skills and significant contributions to the labor force, and further encourage businesses to conduct an internal pay evaluation to ensure that women are being paid fairly. And this was requested by the American Association of University Women. Do we have anyone from AAUW here tonight? No? Okay, I will make sure they receive the proclamation. Our first council action item for the night is an ordinance to consider an ordinance that would vacate a portion of Northwest Bellevue Place. And here comes Brad, our Community Development Director.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the public. This is a somewhat unique application for you tonight. You don't receive too many requests to vacate public right-of-way, but I'll just try to walk you through it in terms of what the municipal code says and what this particular application is seeking to accomplish here. So the summary is, as the mayor said, is a request to vacate, in this case, 12.5 feet of public right-of-way, 6.5 on one side and 6 on the other, for a portion of Northwest Bellevue Place. And here on the map, I realize now it's a kind of a lake, right? I have a hard time reading that, but on the left side is Northwest Dimmick, which turns into Highland. And then over on the right side is Northwest Prospect Avenue. So essentially that stretch of Bellevue Place is what's before you tonight. It relates to your council goals to facilitate sustainable and manageable growth. So the authority to vacate right-of-way comes into the municipal code in Title 6, Section 6.44, called street and alley vacations. There's quite a bit in there, but I just pulled out what I thought were the most relevant things for you to know about for tonight. It does allow a petition by private property owner. Of course, the city can initiate vacations as well, but that does give the authority to private property owners to come to the city and request private vacation. It does require that at least 3/4 of the affected property owners for the vacation give written consent to it. It also says that for the public hearing, you have to notice not 25 days more and not 10 days less than the hearing, which is tonight. And then it sets up a process to file and make at the Josephine County Recorder's Office to record that. So the public notifications that are required in Title VI, there's 3 main types: property owners, the Daily Courier newspaper, and physical posting. So those are shown there. We did do a mailing to all the property owners on March 3rd. We also sent it to the Oregon Department of Transportation and Grants Pass Irrigation District, and then the newspaper notice was published on March 7th. And then 2 physical property postings are also required when you do right-of-way vacations. There's an example of the posting there on the right-hand side. So the street view is shown here. This is from Dimick looking to the east. The portion of the Josephine County Public Health Building, there is an existing sidewalk along that stretch there. That is actually the only sidewalk on this portion of Bellevue Place. And then here's a street view from Prospect looking to the west, where it starts to go uphill there. So the request before you tonight, this is the survey that was drawn up by Peter Allen. We'll zoom in on this to kind of give you a little better sense of exactly what you are being asked to give up. But again, here on the left is Highland, and over on the right is Prospect. The dashed lines on both the north and south sides are the area that would be vacated. And you can see all of the property owners and their tax lots listed here. There is a property owner here on the Prospect Avenue frontage, which is shown on the map, but they don't actually have any frontage on Bellevue Place, so they're not affected by this application. They did receive a property notice, however. So here is a zoom-in portion, so you can see again the total right-of-way today is 60 feet. There's 30 feet on the north side of the center line of Bellevue Place and 30 feet on the south side. The proposal is to go to 47.5 from 60. So that means giving up 12.5 feet. And you can see here there would be 6.5 feet that would be essentially released from the city to the adjacent property owners on the north side, and then 6 feet on the south. So a little bit more about the request. Mr. Hamblin, he's the owner of 726 Northwest Bellevue Place, basically right about in the middle of the block on the north side. Was seeking to add a 2-car garage to his property about 1.5 years ago. The building permit ended up being denied because the building front setback has to be 20 feet, and he ended up being less than 20 feet. So that denial was issued. He appealed that denial to the Planning Commission, who upheld the denial, but they did amend the appeal, basically saying if you can keep this, you can keep your building permit active if you basically get a vacation application. As you'll hear from probably Mr. Hamlin is here tonight and can tell you a little bit more about the background if you want to focus in on that part of the application. So he did go and secure written consent from 12 of the 13 tax lot owners that are affected, hired Peter Allen Land Surveying to prepare the survey that I showed you a little earlier. The one property that did not give written consent is the Wilson Family Trust. They're on the very far east end 761 Bellevue Place. They did not submit consent, but the way the code reads, if you don't object in writing, that essentially means consent. So in essence, all property owners have consented to the vacation. So the remaining right-of-way width is 47.5 feet. Public Works Department worked with the layout out there and determined what is the narrowest that they could support in terms of bringing the width down. Thinking about the future, 60 feet is unusual in a single-family detached residential area like this. Most of our right-of-ways are less than. We couldn't actually identify exactly the purpose for why it's 60 feet. That's usually a collector right-of-way width and not a local street collector. So the Public Works Department said, well, we can live with 47.5 feet, because in 47.5 feet you can still get parking on both sides. You get 11-foot travel lanes, you get your on-street parking, and then you can get 5-foot sidewalks. So within that width, you can still accomplish all of the infrastructure that we need. But that does still leave Mr. Hamlin slightly short in order to get the 20 feet. So if you approve this tonight, it would still require a variance application for the remaining, I think it's 1 foot 8 inches. So if you approve it, then the certified copy of the ordinance vacating 12.5 feet of Bellevue Place would proceed forward. Each of that land would be dedicated to those 13 property owners. New titles, descriptions would be filed at the courthouse. There really is no cost implication on the city. Mr. Hamlin paid for the survey and has done all the legwork to get to this point. The call to action date is today. You have the 4 options there to approve it as proposed, approve it in part, deny, or postpone, and there's a recommended motion for you.
Thank you, Brad. Council, do you have questions? DJ, then Rick?
Sure, quick question about that acceptable width. So you would get your travel lanes, you would get your parking, you would get your sidewalk, but then no planter strip buffer between those areas. So I understand that that's a requirement of residential areas. Would we have to circumvent that requirement if the street was to be improved?
We would, and in some situations, the city does allow for curb-tight sidewalks instead of detached. Here it is already curb-tight on the west end of Bellevue Place. This is the Josephine County property. So if in the future the city or potentially private property owners wanted to install, we would just kind of continue that attached curb-tight sidewalk that's already there.
Okay, and then the second question, is this at all in the scope of capital improvement plans, the improvement of the street?
It's not.
It's not, okay, thanks.
Rick?
Thank you. DJ asked my question.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Brad. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? Please step forward, state your name, let us know whether or not you live in the city, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Travis Hamlin. I live in the city and trying to live.
Can you is the light on at the base of your mic?
How about that? All right, sorry about that. Good evening, my name is Travis Hamlin. I'm at 726 Bellevue Place. And I just wanted to mainly thank city staff for helping me through this and working together to figure this out. It certainly wasn't by choice, but essentially bought the property and want to live there and started construction on the inside, and the outside it was an abandoned property. And so got all the building permits, got all the approvals, and went through it, and the inside has been redone. And part of what we found when we acquired the property was that they had built into the existing garage already, and so the decision was made to finish that build out and add the garage. My contractor filed for all the permits, and I left him to do the job. What we found when we did the foundations was when the inspector came out, they needed a flag for the property line, and that's when we discovered that the contractor had misappropriated the right-of-way. So the bittersweet news is that, of course, the 60-foot right-of-way, as Mr. Clark said, is unusual for that type of street, and so the request was put in to make it more of a standard 47.5 right-of-way. If we do that, then there's two ways for me to go. At the Planning Commission, the feedback was that this was something that, could be corrected and should be. And so my hope is that we get approval tonight. I do plan to visit with them about the last 18 inches. I'm about 1 foot and 6 inches short. If that's not approved, the right-of-way will allow me to put the garage in. What it'll make me do is move walls inside at great expense, but at least I'll have a garage. And what I'm hoping for at the Planning Commission is that they'll spare me that detail, but it's taken about 6 months and quite a bit of resources and time. I did contact all property owners. The only property owner I couldn't get, as Mr. Clark said, was the trust house, and tried many times all forms of communication and just couldn't get a response. But every other homeowner has approved it in writing as requested by the city. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Okay, we have discovered that this was not listed correctly on the agenda, so it's really a public hearing for a land use issue, so I should have read something ahead of time. Is it just this one? So.
Yeah.
Okay. Take it back. We're good to go. Do-overs. Okay. Is there anybody else from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? Okay. We will close public comment and turn it back to council for discussion. Valerie.
Yeah, I want to commend you for what you've gone through. This must be quite the piece of property that you want to live with forever, because it looked like it was certainly a lot of work to get to this point. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion and move to approve the vacation of 12.5 feet of public right-of-way along the north and south sides of Northwest Bellevue Place as described in the legal description, and have it read by title only, first read.
Seconded by Rick. Any discussion on the motion? All right. Val, you made the motion to approve the street vacation, and how do you vote?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass vacating a portion of Bellevue Place public right-of-way.
Thank you. Rick?
I'd like to move to approve the vacation of 12.5 feet of public right-of-way along the north and south sides of Northwest Bellevue Place as described in the legal description, and have it read by title only, second reading.
Seconded by Vanessa. All right, any discussion? Rick, you made the motion this time. How do you vote?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Yes.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass vacating a portion of Bellevue Place public right-of-way.
Thank you, Karen. Next up, we have a consideration of a resolution that would adopt the City of Grants Pass housing production strategy.
All right, good evening, Council. I'm Amber Neek. I'm the Housing and Neighborhood Specialist here for the City of Grants Pass. And I also have here presenting with me tonight Beth Goodman with Eco Northwest. They have been our consultant throughout this project. And we have met with you a couple times over this. We've met with various different public members, and I'll go over that in my follow-up slides. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and hand you over to Beth for our what should be our final overview of the housing production strategies tonight. Beth, I'll have you take it away.
Thank you very much, Amber. Sorry, I'm getting my screen shared. So I have a presentation here that is very similar to what we talked about the last time I was in front of you all. So I'd just like to step through it briefly, and if you have any questions, I trust that somebody in the room will tell me to stop and answer the questions. So a housing production strategy, it's an 8-year action plan. It's intended to identify near and long-term actions to support development of needed housing, as well as preservation of existing affordable housing. It's got actions in it that are focused on things that the city has a strong leadership role in, including partnerships. And the actions, each of them are projects, many of which will require a public process and staff time and possibly funding to accomplish over the next 8 years. Here's a brief version of our scope of work and our schedule to date. We started here in January 2022, and here we are in March 2023, presenting the final to you. So this is a list of the stakeholders who've been involved. Amber might discuss this in a little bit more detail. I'm not going to go over this in a lot of detail. You can see what we've got here. We worked with the Housing Advisory Committee and a subcommittee of that to develop the housing production strategy. We did focus groups and had discussions with developers and service providers and affordable housing developers to get feedback on the actions that we were including in the HPS to make sure it made sense. We've met several times with the Urban Area Planning Commission and with the City Council and incorporated feedback from each of these groups. So it's important to remember what a housing production strategy requires of the city. So the state is requiring the city to commit to implementing the actions in the HPS. That means essentially a good faith commitment to implementing them. Some of the actions may be ones that as you find you're working on evaluating them or considering implementing them, that is just not a good match for Grants Pass and for what your housing needs are. And that's okay. You can work with the state to change your housing production strategy and remove actions that aren't a good fit and substitute in new actions that are an appropriate fit. Of course, there's going to be changes in available funding, in other conditions over this next 8 years. Your HPS isn't necessarily expected to be static during that time. You're going to be required to update DLCD on your implementation progress at a 4-year mark, and you're required to comment on the effectiveness of the housing production strategy for development of housing when you next do an HPS in 8 years. You're also required to report on strategies that you haven't implemented in the schedule that you adopt. Remember that things that aren't in the HPS can still be implemented by the city, but you're not held to specific action by the state. So a few updates on the final version of the HPS, and this is based on, I think, discussions that we had with you as well as some other stakeholders. We changed Action A to also include the opportunity for a UGB land swap of moving land that's within the UGB to outside the UGB and bringing in land to replace that. It's something that I think has been getting some discussion in Grants Pass recently, and there may be opportunity to do it, or the city may decide that there's not a good opportunity. Looking at Action C, dedicating surplus city lots for affordable housing, we added an implication consideration that the city might use funds from the sale of lots that aren't appropriate for development of new housing, and instead use those funds for housing if the city chose. And then looking at Action I, expanding the funding and outreach for rehabilitation of existing housing and low-cost unregulated housing, we added potential state and federal funding sources to that to be as up-to-date as we could with those. Those are the major changes that have been made, and they're not very major, since the HPS was completed. here's a summary of the actions. I don't necessarily want to step through all of these actions because I feel like we've talked with you about this enough. But if you have any questions on a specific action, I'm happy to stop and answer that question. And I think, is it okay to pause here and ask if there's any questions?
Sure. Council, do you have any questions? Nope. Oh, Joel has one.
Reading the headlines to tonight's paper, there was the program from the state on homelessness and different actions they were going to take for the housing shortage, and several of those items aren't listed in our plan. Do you have any? You probably aren't familiar with what the state legislature is working on, and any coordination between. It seems like there's some areas that are a little disjointed between what this plan would do and what the state would fund.
So that's, I'm not sure which pieces of what the state would be funding you're thinking about. But that's a little bit of the fact that we developed this before the beginning of the legislative process, and there's a lot of motion there. So is there any particular piece that you were wondering about? Because I haven't read the same article that you've read.
Well, the one thing that comes to mind, and I haven't studied it thoroughly, I just glanced at it before I came today, because it's in today's headlines, but like the rent assistance program and the landlord assistance program, and there were several other programs that were emphasized, and then there were some that weren't funded that may be listed here in our plan, and I just it seems like we got two efforts going, and there's some agreement and there's some not, and one comes down with money and the other one would take money away from other things. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on that, and the question I had was if there's something there that makes sense that we didn't put in, I would guess that we would have the flexibility to do that. And if there was something that on there that doesn't make sense, given what's going on around us and what's funded and what's not, then we could also take that out.
Yes, I think those things are true. So none of these are really depending heavily on funding sources that the legislature had offered before that they're not offering now. So things like expanding the funding and outreach for rehabilitation of existing low-cost unregulated housing. The state funding for that has been something that was passed in one of the recent legislative sessions that the Oregon Health Authority rather, is still writing administrative rules about how to implement. So that's an example of one that funding on that's not really changing in this biennium. A lot of the rest of these, like developing a program to support affordable home ownership, that might be subject to new funding. There may be opportunities that are available at the end of this legislative session that weren't available before. But none of these things are necessarily going to slip out from underneath of your fingers because of changes in what's in state funding for this next biennium. I think what may happen is you may have opportunities that just aren't on the table right now that you may want to include. So again, if there's actions that the city wants to do that weren't available before, or newly appealing or newly legal or whatever it is, over this 8-year period, you can add them into your HPS, or you could choose to do them outside of your HPS.
Vanessa.
So that's it.
I think Councilor King is referring to House Bill 2001, and I did have a related question. Are you familiar with that legislation?
I am. We've had a lot to do with that bill.
Okay, I understand that folds in the statements that Councilor King had stated, and also the Oregon-wide housing needs analysis. So how does that second half play into today's discussion?
Well, just so you know, I was one of the people who worked on the initial versions of the Oregon housing needs analysis. I haven't worked on the most recent one. My colleagues were working on that. So that's not even going to start to be implemented by cities until, I believe it's 2026. So the answer is you have your housing needs analysis. It was adopted, I think, last year, if I'm remembering that correctly. It could have also been 2021. The city will be required to do, let's say it's in 2021, because I can do the math there quickly. The city will be required to do another housing production strategy 8 years later. So that's either 2029 or 2030. At that point, you'll be using the information out of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis instead of doing the housing needs analysis the way you did it last time. And then as part of that, you'll also be developing a new housing production strategy. The relationship between the housing needs analysis and the housing production strategy are changed by House Bill 2001 a little bit, but it's not going to be a problem for you, is what I'm saying. So it doesn't change what we've got here. Cities are going to have to continue doing this work over the next few years as the rules are written for exactly how you implement the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Certainly.
Valerie?
Yeah, I just want to expand on that a little bit too, because I also have followed along with it, and I know that one of the things is the state, Oregon, is going to do a housing needs. So what I'm asking is, are we redoing, or are you just still traveling around and doing them all within the state? Or are they going to do one for the entire state? Because I was kind of confused knowing that we had just done ours, that it was going to need to be redone, and so I'm confused as to whether what we're doing right now has to be redone, or we won't do it again for 8 years.
You won't do it again for 8 years.
Okay, and so
and go ahead. I'm sorry.
so that fits under the Oregon one because we're just a part of Oregon. And then is the state doing a whole one, or are they just making sure the entire state is covered? I guess that's my question.
It'll be done differently. So what the state will be doing is running the part of the housing needs analysis that looks at housing demand. So it'll be taking information from population forecast, from employment forecast, from regional housing affordability, several other things. And each year, once the ONA is what they're calling it, the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, is in place, I think starting in 2025, the state will run that model each year. And produce allocations for every city in the state that's above 10,000 people. And then cities will be required to do the part of the housing capacity analysis that is the buildable lands inventory. But because, of course, doing a buildable lands inventory, having watched Metro do theirs for years, you've got 24 cities there versus 216 cities across all of Oregon. Each city has different zoning and has different zoning requirements and different historical development densities, et cetera, et cetera. So your housing capacity analysis, when you do it next time in 8 years, is going to be partially an allocation and targets of new housing from the state, and then looking at your buildable land and saying how much capacity does your buildable land have, and then do a comparison and figure out if you've got enough land to accommodate the forecast for new housing. And the forecasts are going to be different than they've been recently, because they're going to account for things like underproduction of housing and people experiencing homelessness. So I'm not giving any predictions about whether there's enough land, is what I'm saying. And then you will have to deal with the results of that. Do you need a UGB expansion? Do you need to change your existing land use policies to make better efficient use of land within the city? And then what else do you need to do to support development of needed housing that's affordable, like the kind of things that we've got in the HPS today? So it's a little different, but it's by the time you guys have to do yours, the process will be known more, and a few other cities will have gone first.
Okay. This sounds like a lot of bureaucracy.
It'll actually make some pieces of this much easier.
Any other questions? All right.
Okay. So to accomplish your actions in your housing production strategy, you have to think about how are we going to pay for some of these actions. Things like supporting development of affordable housing, things like supporting renovation, rehabilitation is the word I'm trying to get to actually, rehabilitation of low-cost housing, that kind of thing. Well, you've got a construction excise tax, and so you know how you're going to spend that to support affordable rental housing at below 100% of median family income. You've got urban renewal, and you can spend some of that on housing or building infrastructure that supports housing. The infrastructure may also support other commercial development, for instance, in your urban renewal area. You've got some ARPA funds that the city has planned for using those. State and federal grants. Private donations and gifts, those certainly could be things that come in, but the city is not like a nonprofit where you're looking at developing substantial amounts of staff time to pursue private donations and gifts. And then all the other things that are listed on this slide that are in gray are ones that we've identified as being unlikely to be pursued by the city based on discussions with city staff and with your stakeholders for one reason or another. So for instance, a general obligation bond is unlikely, or a new sales tax is unlikely. Things like a real estate transfer tax, that's not legal in Oregon. So this is the funding considerations. So it's important to know that certain things you have to have funding for. And I won't go through this in a lot of detail, but each of the actions in your HPS talks about the partnerships that you have to accomplish these different actions. So for instance, if you're looking at refocusing your existing system development charge waiver program to include density waivers in selected areas, obviously the city has a lead role in that, and obviously you'd want input from your developers, your market rate, and your affordable housing developers. So for most of these, I think all of these, there's at least one partner that you'll need to work with to accomplish these. And so it's important to remember that. And then the implementation schedule. Again, this is a schedule by which you're expecting to adopt, take official action in some of the cases, because there may not be an adoption, each of the strategies, each of the actions. And so in a number of cases, we've got refinement of the action happening here in 2023, and then adoption happening by the end of 2024. And we've worked through with Brad and Amber this adoption schedule and discussed it with our stakeholders. The idea is not to have everything happen in any one year, but not necessarily to push things out too far. And then you've got monitoring, and we've given you a few examples of the kind of monitoring that you'd want to do with different actions. So for instance, as you're rezoning land that has been brought into the UGB through your last UGB expansion, you'd probably want to know things like the acres of land rezoned by zoning district, the acres of land annexed. You might also want to track on those lands the number of units that were developed, et cetera. So we've got a section of the report that talks about we're trying to emphasize simple monitoring indicators, but the kind of thing that the city may want to track so that it can report in 8 years about its progress, as well as the city knowing the impact the housing production strategy is having. And that's really the end of it. The next steps after the city has accepted the HPS, adopted it, is beginning to implement the actions. So that's where the work is. And that is the presentation that I have for you. Are there any other questions?
Thank you, Beth. We do have other questions. Go ahead, Joel.
Well, the one question I had was on who are the partners? The private sector is notoriously absent from that. Was there a reason for that, why we don't have the contractors? And 'cause it seems like they're a big piece of that. In fact, the council at their strategic planning talked about hearing from them more often, trying to get things to happen. Was that intentionally left off, or was that just overlooked? Or?
I would put partners under this, this category of developers. So contractors, developers, people involved in building housing is what that's meant to be. And in some cases, you might have other partners like lending institutions.
Rick?
On slide 12.
Thank you.
You indicated dedicate surplus city lots for affordable housing development. You already mentioned that, but I'm just confirming we still have discretion as to which lots could be used for that, right? We're not locked into that phrase as such. Is that correct?
No, that's why we've got surplus. So the city might identify a lot as not being needed in the next 2 years, but not identify it as surplus. Or you might identify it as surplus, and some of those lots that you identify as surplus, you may sell and use the profits from that sale for something other than affordable housing. And some of them you may sell and use the revenue from that for affordable housing. So you're not locked in. There's a lot of decisions to be made under all of these pieces.
Okay, thank you for that confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right, looks like that's all of our questions tonight, Beth.
Okay.
And I'm just going to follow up with my official presentation. Okay. So this might breeze through a little bit since we had such a wonderful in-depth opening. So summary, the City Council is considering approving a resolution to adopt the housing production strategy for the City of Grants Pass. This relates to council goals through the facilitating sustainable and manageable growth by incentivizing the development of new affordable housing. This is achieved by adopting this long-range plan to implement the city's housing needs analysis. A little bit of background, which we got a lot of just now, so I might breeze through it a little bit. But the City of Grants Pass has long had concerns about housing affordability in our city. The 2021 Grants Pass strategic plan included an objective to encourage an environment which provides for the growth of affordable housing opportunities for the variety of Grants Pass residents' needs. The plan directed staff to implement a housing action plan, which will be accomplished through this project. The city completed its housing needs analysis in 2021, and effective January 1 of 2021, OAR 660-008 described the requirements of the housing production strategy for cities with populations of more than 10,000. The city did receive a technical assistance award through the Department of Land Conservation and Development in 2021 to produce our housing production strategy with the assistance from our consultant, Eco Northwest. And then we began working with Eco Northwest on this project in January of 2022. The city did hold an open house for the public in February of 2022 to discuss with the public the direction of the housing production strategy. Our Housing Advisory Committee has worked with the consultant and city staff to aid in the development of our housing production strategy. They met on 3 different occasions in April, October, and December of 2022 to work with our consultant. The city also formed a housing production strategy subcommittee comprised of city staff, developers, service providers, and general public members who worked closely with our consultant and city staff to aid in the development of the housing production strategies. We met on 3 separate occasions with that subcommittee in March, June, and August of 2022. We then took our initial drafts to 3 different focus groups. We had one geared towards affordable housing developers, getting feedback from them. We also had one specifically for local housing developers and builders at market rate. And then our last focus group was for service providers for vulnerable populations. That was in July of 2022. We had those 3. And then we took the housing production strategies to be reviewed by our Urban Area Planning Commission on 3 separate occasions, July and December of 2022, and then for the final time in February of this year, 2023. We had our last review with City Council this January of 2023, and that puts us here today. So call to action, there's no cost implication. Call to action date is council discretion. We do want to have this approved by the end of this year for the ORS requirements. And staff recommends council approve the resolution approving the housing production strategy for the City of Grants Pass. And then we have a couple alternatives up as well. Any questions for me?
Thanks, Amber. Dwayne?
I got a couple questions here. Do you know how many affordable housing developers came to that meeting on the 21st of July?
I don't have that on the top of my head. Beth, do you have that in your records nearby?
I will see if I can find that. I don't remember off the top of my head.
How about the local housing developers? How many builders came to that one?
For all 3 of those focus groups, hopefully, I'm hoping Beth can dig that out of her notes since she's
And
at her
then who are the
computer.
vulnerable populations here that they talking
Off the
about?
top of my head, I recall we had representatives from Hearts with a Mission. I know we had a representative from, I want to say, Habitat for Humanity, Options. Again, I'm hoping Beth can pull up that list. We had a concise list for it.
Okay.
Give me a moment or two. I just have to locate where that information would be.
Okay. Are there any other questions while we're waiting? No? Okay. Do you want to go forward with public comment and discussion? We'll come back to that. Okay. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this? All right. That wasn't much of a stall tactic. Turn it back to council for discussion. DJ.
Sure. This document is large. There's a lot of information in there. This is bureaucratic busy work in its brightest colors. I have not spent the appreciable amount of time absorbing this document, but heretofore, I have noticed that I'm just going to be totally honest here, there's a serious lack of innovation in this document. I've learned so far in my readings, nothing that has shown innovation in the progress of solving our housing crisis, particularly that the Housing Advisory Committee hasn't already come up with. I would very much so like to see that innovation in this document. We have time. We have until the end of this year to adopt this document, and I would move to defer this decision until a later date for those reasons.
Is that an actual motion? Seconded by Dwayne there. All right, discussion on that? Vanessa?
I am curious to learn more, Councilor Fazer. Do you have any recommendations or any scope that you'd like to see explored?
As far as procedurally, I think a workshop in the future so that we can iron out details after we've had appreciable time to absorb the document. I think, as Councilor Junker has pointed out, that there might be some communities in this, some organizations in this community that might also want to digest this document, take a little bit more time with it. So that's my knee-jerk response.
Any other discussion? Valerie?
Well, I was on the subcommittee with it, and so they've kind of listened to my complaints through and through. I agree, it is a lot of busy work, and you're right. As I go through and read this, I think everybody knows how badly we need affordable housing and housing in general. And I think this is just kind of the state's way of saying, well, if we put it down, they're going to do these things. And, and there's a few ideas, but there's a couple ideas too that I still question, one of them being the MUPT, which some communities, which is the property tax, lowering the property tax for affordable housing in large, which is a problem because we have a very limited property tax in level, and so that just is one more taking away from our property tax. So I think they've done a good job of generically putting through things that could work to do it, but I agree, it's not necessarily anything that hasn't come through. I think you're just basically rubber stamping what the state says we need to do. And to me, the frustration is I sometimes think if we took all the money that went into doing these documents and doing all these consultants and doing all of this paperwork, and they just put that package and divided all that money and sent it to individual communities to utilize for SDC waivers, we'd probably get a whole lot of houses built. So that's probably my biggest complaint, is just that, is that I think this is, and it's only getting bigger with what's coming down now from the state. So, you know, I think basically it's just rubber stamping what the state wants us to do, which we all want, which is affordable housing and assuring everybody that we're making and reaching those goals. I'm not sure this is by having everybody have this piece of paper and putting it on a shelf, I'm not sure that's going to get it done any faster, and I'm not sure exactly where the accountability falls. And that's my kind of question is, in the past, she always said, well, you know, we could change it, and there's not going to be any consequences if you don't reach your goal. But since then, in the new one, I've heard that, no, they're going to come and hold the cities more responsible. And I have a problem being held responsible for housing when I know it's really a private capitalistic venture, and banks have more to do with, and lending have more to do with it than we have to do with it. So that's my only concern, is I worry about trying to push down to the bottom the accountability when it's not something that we really are responsible for. So I'm fine with putting it off and exploring it more if you want to take it out there. But I think it's just, we're just being asked to rubber stamp something from the state saying that we're working on it, which we all know we are.
Vanessa.
To some extent, I would disagree with some of what you had said, Councilor Lovelace. We are in a housing crisis because of market failures. So continue to leave it up to the market is going to get us the same result as to where we are today. And I do think that this plan does outline, they have done some legwork and they have done research into what areas need to be rezoned, what areas strategically can be annexed for more housing production. So there is some really good information in this document, but if there is a concern among councilors that they'd like more public participation, I can get on board with that as well.
Joel.
I just had a question. Is the state, as part of their production strategy, looking at changing the land use laws to allow more housing? Because that is a big barrier. Does anyone?
Yeah.
I mean, and they're telling us what to do, but that is probably the most limiting barrier that we have.
I'm not watching the current legislative session and the land use bills that are going through. I certainly have. If Councilor, you're saying, is there consideration given to easier expansion of urban growth boundaries?
Well, not just the urban growth boundary, but the land use laws of the state of Oregon that prohibit housing in rural areas. You know, it's easy to tell it's easy for the state legislature to kill the Grants Pass thing, to have these few toys and do something with these few toys. Meanwhile, all these other toys are off limits because they don't take any action on that. And that's a little frustrating, I think, to all of us.
Have we had any luck in tracking down the data from the previous forums?
Yeah, so I can tell you that from service providers, we had 7 participants, one from Southern Oregon 2050, another from All Care Health, another who works with people experiencing homelessness, the director of Hearts of the Mission, and a case manager with unhoused youth and family. Those are the people specifically that were there that I've got written down. And there were a couple of others, including that's one that a developer also attended. When we talked to affordable housing developers, we had 6 participants in that one. And then we had 4 participants in the market rate developers, but remember that another participant was in one of the other focus groups. We had a little crossover among our focus groups. So there's that. Can I make one or two comments back about what was just said? About the housing production strategy and the potential efficacy of what you've got in there?
Yes.
So if you really want to support housing, affordable housing development, a lot of the work of that, assuming that you can't change state land use planning requirements, a lot of the work of that ends up involving additional funding. So for instance, what Hood River has done is they have used funds from their construction excise tax and from urban renewal, and they're supporting development directly of 100 and some units. I forget the exact number, where they're working with the developer to get the development happening. That's something that we've seen happen in parts of Metro as well, where they issued a Metro-wide general obligation bond. So part of the constraint that the city has in what's in the housing production strategy is the funding that's available. So if more funding was available, you'd be able to do a wider range of changes. These are the kinds of changes that the city has been talking about for a while, many of them. Some of them are things that are newly brought to the table, like supporting rehabilitation, through seeking additional funding, that kind of thing. But some of these are very basic things that have to get done. So changes, for instance, to your development code to address ways in which your development code, I think, is unintentionally lowering density for multifamily housing development, those kind of things. So there are certainly additional things that the city can do. Some of them might take funding. A lot of them would take funding. And you might consider, when you adopt your HPS at some point, whether there are other things that you want to add at a later point to the housing production strategy. So, no, we didn't try to go very radically different, in part because there's just not a lot of funding to support this kind of housing development.
Back to you, Council. Any further discussion?
I just wanted to add one thing if possible. I know it was brought up that this kind of mirrors what we hear from the housing committee, and part of that is that they worked very closely with us on this document, so that's bound to happen, that they're going to be mirroring the same things. And quite frankly, we've started on a couple of these objectives already because they're so active in participating with this document.
Vanessa?
Following up with that, there was a recommendation in the report to create a committee to follow the progress of the HBS. Would that be assigned to the Housing Advisory Committee, or would that be a new committee, in your opinion?
I would imagine that would be assigned to the Housing Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
Valerie?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I think that the reality of it is we all know that anything we can do to get housing happening is important. And I do believe in reading this document that we are doing a lot of things in this document. So I do know that we've been working, and many of the things that are there are things that we have been working. You know, we sold property, and that's what built up the cost, is to put it into affordable housing. So a lot of this we've been doing. So I don't know, you know, I could approve it today because I do think that it's just basically what we're doing and what is important to do. My biggest fear is down the road somewhere, you know, something happens with the economy, nothing happens, and then we get held accountable. But I am in support of the housing plan and moving forward with it, whenever.
If I could just respond to that really quick. When they talk about holding us accountable, they're holding us accountable to implementing to the best of our ability the action, not necessarily a specific number of units or a success factor of how much housing was produced. While that's definitely a bonus that we want to be tracking, what the state is specifically holding us accountable to is that we did our best in trying to achieve these strategies and get them implemented.
All right, DJ, I apologize because I didn't totally catch your motion, but it was to defer a decision tonight or defer this to a workshop for further discussion? Is that,
I didn't specify a date certain.
okay, so just to defer a decision tonight. Okay, so that's the motion. Is there any further discussion? Joel?
Well, one of the things I need to ask DJ is, so as we move forward, you know, do you have a plan? Is it a good plan? And then you go, is it working? And so this is a plan. Is it a good plan? We're doing most of it already. Is it working? Well, it seems like our housing needs versus our building has done pretty good. The interest rates have helped us, and the private sector has helped us tremendously. As we move forward, I'm just thinking of energy tied up in not having an approved plan, is having an improved plan, and then looking at the innovation. There's some innovations coming out of the governor's office that I saw today that isn't reflected in here. An alternative would be to approve the plan, and then if there is innovations, or if there's things that don't make sense, we just don't do them. Because so do you have a plan, yes or no? Is it a good plan? There'll be parts that yes, and parts that no. And the parts that are no, then you change your plan. You know, you add to it. So so I'm kind of on the fence a little bit. And I'd like you to respond, because I respect your opinion.
Large part of not wanting to adopt this plan tonight is that I have not thoroughly digested this plan. And, you know, if anybody up here has that, you are doing awesome. So that's pretty much the lion's share. And then I guess to kind of backpack on what Valerie said, yeah, having a strategy is excellent. Having a plan is a really good idea. But I think that some good work can be done from here to there to work on this production strategy.
Any additional? Dwayne?
I just say that I have a problem just rubber stamping something that came from Salem and not really digging into it. And I'm already in the housing business as a realtor, and I have clients that we build houses, flip houses, and stuff like that. And so, you know, my biggest concern is government usually causes more problems. So I would like more time to dig into this, ask more questions. So that's where I'm going to be pushing.
Rick?
I'm also guilty. I'm only halfway through the document, so I guess I would appreciate the extra time, and I guess I would like, if we could come up with some suggestions, or they can come up with some suggestions, as the word was, DJ used, innovative, and I think that's easy to do, but it'd be nice to see in the document. Thank you.
Vanessa?
Please come prepared in the future.
Further discussion? All right, the motion was to defer making a decision on this tonight. DJ, how do you vote?
Yes.
Vanessa?
No.
Rob?
Yes.
Val?
No.
Joel?
Yes.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
All right, motion passes 5-2. We will hit that one again another day. We have next on the agenda to consider a resolution that would establish a sustainable tourism grant program. Hello, Dana.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. This evening, I'm going to present a resolution on the Sustainable Tourism Grant. And this resolution will establish a grant program to help nonprofit organizations promote tourism in Grants Pass through a variety of promotional activities. It relates to council goals by encouraging economic opportunities, by designating a portion of the transient lodging tax to fund projects and promotions. A little bit of background. On October 10th in 2022, there was a council workshop where recommendations were made by the Tourism Advisory Council to use surplus transient lodging tax money to fund a grant program that would support tourism promotion for Grants Pass. These funds must be used according to ORS 320.350 and Municipal Code 4.05.240. And under that, of the 40% designated for tourism promotion, you know that 28% goes to our Visit Grants Pass DMO. And then the remaining tourism promotion funds are eligible to be allocated to the new annual grant program, pending your decision. The Economic Development staff researched other cities and similar programs and drafted the Sustainable Tourism Grant Program, which you have a copy of in front of you. You can take a look. Under the program, the eligibility criteria would be the applicant would need to be a registered nonprofit. They'd have to be located within the urban growth boundary of the City of Grants Pass, and those grant expenses that they use must be TLT eligible. So they we have to be attracting people from 50 plus miles away or leading to overnight stays in Grants Pass. Some example projects would fall under the categories of sustainable events, outdoor recreation, historically significant events, community-focused or touring. A review of the process and the funding, we're looking at a minimum of $2,500 and a maximum of $10,000. There would be no match required. The annual timeline looks a bit like this. We would open the application in March, and in April we would have a grant review subcommittee review it. That subcommittee would be made up of 2 TAC members and 3 staff members, and we've also provided a scoring tool that can be used to help rank the different applications. In May, the Tourism Advisory Committee would have an opportunity to review it, and then in June the awards would be announced. July would be the time funds would be available. We also included a grant reporting element so that we could collect some data from those applicants and try and determine that the projects they're doing are sustainable. The cost implications, the revenue source would be a surplus from the transient lodging tax. The funds would be established by council annually during the budget process. Other cities with similar programs were providing $80,000 to $100,000 for promotional tourism promotion, and so the staff recommends $35,000 for this first year, FY24. The call to action this evening is at your discretion. You can choose to take action tonight or move it to an additional workshop. Your alternatives would be to approve the proposed sustainable tourism grant, modify it, deny it, and I've also provided a motion here for you, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Vanessa, then Val?
I did see that that economic development has a grant application already, and it does encompass several different programs. It looks like the STC, building facade, URA. So I was wondering why this didn't just fall into that application.
This is specifically a tourism promotion grant, so the funds come from a very specific pot of money, which is from the transient lodging tax, and it's actually designated specifically for tourism promotion. So that's why we've separated it out.
Thank you.
Valerie, then DJ?
Yeah, then my question was kind of the same, just clarification. So 40% of that funding is for tourism promotion, and 28% of it goes to the DMO, so I'm assuming that's the other 12%, or does that also, is that kind of?
Yeah, that's what we're assessing, okay. Yeah, and honestly, finance kind of does some more, you
does
might.
The magic.
Sure.
Yeah, just to kind of go through it briefly, there's some staff time for obviously administration of all of the tourism promotion activities. There's also some costs associated there that we have dedicated to tourism promotion.
But I'm just thinking it's different than the facilities, right? So that's a different pot of money. Okay.
Very different, and it's outlined that in our municipal code.
That's what I thought, so I just want to clarify. And then the only other thing I have a question about, and this is because I don't completely understand how, if it's only for nonprofits, because I think about, I don't know if, like when Fort Vanoy does their thing, or when some things do them, and, you know, and it's kind of a community event, but I don't know if they're nonprofit or not. So does it have to be a nonprofit? That's in dealing with other cities, were they always nonprofits?
In some cases it was. We established that as a piece of criteria just because we knew it was something where we could establish need. And so that's what we established. But it's not like that in every cities, but it is in some. So it's kind of varied depending on the city.
Okay, I think that's my only question, my only hesitation.
DJ, then Joel?
So my question's similar to Vanessa's, but it's more focused on procedure. So I understand that it is a different pot of money, but procedurally, this is markedly different than BRAG grants or SDC grants. Why is it procedurally different in that there's a criteria, it goes through a criteria process, sure, Tourism Advisory, whoever committee, and then ultimately a council decision on a case-by-case basis? I understand this to be, like I mentioned, very different in that, you know, here's now an opening, everybody can apply, we're going to look at them all at the same time, and then whoever gets it, gets it. Why is it so procedurally different?
I think because when it comes to grants, like you said, being able to assess them all at one time gives you an opportunity to really decide where the funds are going to go and to better utilize them, rather than just kind of waiting for them to roll in over time. So I think that's one of the reasons why we thought it would be good to establish a process, and it's an annual process. It would be easy to communicate that to the public, so the public can say, oh, I know when this grant opens, I can apply during this time. It would become a cycle that's easier to follow in that way. I don't know if you have something to add, Brad, but...
I would just add that, we're anticipating that events related to, the promotion of Grants Pass are largely going to be things like the Porch Fest and, our other signature events that are fairly more predictable. In the private sector economic development grant programs that we have that both counselors had mentioned, we really don't know which business is ready at which time. It just depends on that business owner's plan, and they may be ready for an expansion tomorrow, or they may be planning on next week. We really don't know. Our sense is that there's a little bit more predictability with the tourism promotion and the events that are coming up, and so it might actually help them as well to know. Okay, well, the deadline to apply for this money is April of every year. And they can spend it, within that next year anytime, depending on when they want to do it. And some of this, too, is trying to get the shoulder seasons of our tourism, rather than not just the summertime, but some of the fall and maybe some early spring. Just having a deadline, we kind of thought was helpful. We did rely on some other cities for this type of program to sort of just see how they've been modeling it and how they've been successful at it, and this seems to be one lesson learned from other communities too.
Joel, then Rob?
So I understand, I think, what you said on the nonprofit issue, and I understand what Brad said. But I don't, and that can be handled with the evaluation criteria. I don't know why you'd want to limit it to just one or the other. Because you might have some fantastic private sector companies that want to do something. You could have a bicycle sponsorship come in for Dollar Mountain. You could have the Daytona 500, and so I didn't hear a reason why we would limit it to just a certain segment of whether you're making a profit or not. I think that might limit the effectiveness of the dollars and achieving our objectives. That's not a question.
No. I guess that's up for...
I'm sorry. I goofed up. What do you think?
We could modify it. We could modify it to include business as well. I mean, we could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Rob, then DJ.
First, I'm going to try to turn that into a question for Joel. So we hear, I mean, obviously it's council discretion, we can do what we want with that, but what advantage is there? How do you feel that tourism would be benefited by limiting it to nonprofits? How does that benefit tourism? Because that is the goal here, is to benefit tourism. So how would limiting it to nonprofits benefit that?
And that's a good question. I think it's more,
Thank you, Joel.
like I said, in the long run, I do think the reason why we made these decisions was, limiting the criteria helps the processing side of it. If you're getting this flood of applications and we have to process it, within a certain amount of time. I do think also, again, the need element, it's the piece that we can kind of narrow down and make it so that what we receive is going to fulfill what we're expecting. But if that's something that we don't agree on, then that's fine. It's something that can be modified.
So, thank you. So, another question. I don't know if this is practical, real world, likely to come up, but getting back to, I guess, DJ's point, if the dollars are not allocated by, and who knows, some years, we may end up increasing the allocations in future years, but if all the dollars are not used or allocated by April 1st, are they just going to sit dormant, even if someone came in with an application for something that sounded reasonable in May for a fall event? If we have unallocated dollars, according to the way it's written now, they would just be out of luck for the year, right? Even if we still had money sitting there. Is that correct?
Yeah, but I think in the long run, what we're trying to do is establish an annual program. So by doing that, we establish a time frame. People know when to apply. Someone could apply now for an event that they're doing in May of next year, and they could receive funds for that. That is, I think, the weird thing about starting the program is that you have this gap in time, right, where we're trying to establish it now and people don't know about it yet. So there's going to be this time where people are wanting these funds but can't access them, but by next year, people will understand that cycle and be able to access them. Does that make sense?
It kind of
it doesn't look like
it kind of makes sense, but I don't think it answered my question. So,
I'm sorry.
So when you, on any given year, when the deadline happens, if you haven't found worthy applicants and the money's not allocated and we've got money sitting there left over, like, why should it essentially just roll over to the following year? You could still have a deadline every year.
Yeah.
But, it also means that if there's funding that's still available.
Sure.
People could still, I don't see the advantage
We
to
could
doing
do
that.
we could do another cycle as well. We decided we would do just a single cycle in the first year just because of administrative. It's our first time trying it. We're doing this. We were going to, run the program, see the applicants we got, and do the assessment there. And then if we determine, like you said, that we didn't get enough applicants, we can always open that back up. But initially, we thought we would at least establish a time frame that we think that we could process it in and make it realistic.
So another question is on the, it says no match required. And I don't know if you were aware of a couple of years ago with the Art Along the Rogue, we basically, council created a plan where essentially we were going to give them a certain amount of funding, and we were also going to go over and above that with a match if they actually came in. And it turned out it worked out really well for them because they were able to take that leverage out to the private sector, and basically with that promise, they were able to raise more money. We then matched it. It was nothing but win-win. We were sure then that they would actually go out and work harder. They did. They got more money. It was fantastic. So it was a great lever for both the arts community. It was a great lever for council. So why did you decide that no match required is a positive?
We just felt that having the access, it would make it easy for them to access at that point, not having a match.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that, easy is necessarily a great criteria, meaning that, anyone could come along with an idea that maybe isn't even that popular, and they're going to come out and they're just going to get some free money, and God knows what's going to happen that year. It might be great, it might not be. But if you had someone who was a little bit more focused, and there was some, because, I would think that if somebody's somewhat serious about an idea for a relatively major event, they can go out and get some private sector help for it, whether it's, people come for small dollar amounts, people come to me in my store all the time. For larger dollar amounts, we know who they go to if they have a really good plan. Well, to me, that would help the selection process. It would really, so I'm just wondering, I don't see how it helps it, and I guess you're saying from a procedural standpoint, it makes your job easier in a sense, I guess, but I don't understand exactly beyond that,
Rob,
how
we
you chose
can
it.
amend it if council would like to amend this. This is just the proposal for this program, so I think we want to, I think she's answered the question, and we can make amendments if we don't want to do it this way. Just to quickly touch on a topic you raised, though, these funds can only be spent on the marketing piece, so theoretically, whatever other costs of establishing the event would need to be paid by the organizer, and this would just go to helping promote for more than 50 miles away. So theoretically, even like local advertising, it wouldn't be able to be spent on the courier because that's not going to bring in somebody from 50 miles away, that sort of thing. So I think there are inherently other costs.
Also, within the criteria and in the scoring, we did, if you had a chance to look at that, we did ask a lot of questions to try and really establish someone's buy-in, what they're really wanting to do. We want them to show that their event is going to be sustainable, that it could be done again next year, so that's what we're really hoping for. So some of the actual application and the process actually details a lot of that, which we would get from that applicant and kind of sort through at that point.
DJ, then Valerie. Questions for staff?
JC, what's the sum total TLT available surplus, and how's that looking extrapolated?
As of today, there's about $220,000-ish available. We actually went through and financially planned this within for the next few budgets and tried to make this as sustainable as possible. Looking at it, that it is a reevaluation, so there is potential for a larger allocation in the future.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I have a question about your grant reporting. It says applicants should provide actual data as a direct result of the city's grant on one or more of the following outcomes. That seems rather onerous. Is this a boilerplate recommendation that you see in other grant applications for TLT dollars? And I'm just curious how one could expect a nonprofit or a private organization to actually be able to garner, track, and document this information for the city.
I think the goal is to try and get that information. By asking for that, we're going to get more than by not asking for it. So I think the goal is really to get them to collect some data for us and to help us understand, are these funds actually, being used and being effective how we want them to be. I think that's the ultimate goal. It does, like you said, seem like harsh criteria perhaps, but in the long run, I think when this actually plays out, people will apply, they will go through the whole process, and in the end, we're just going to ask them for a report that says, hey, give us your financial summary. How did this go? What kind of data did you collect during the event that tells us that people came from 50 miles away, or that you attracted some different demographic, that sort of thing. So I think the goal is really to just encourage them to provide us with more information so that we can ensure that our funds are being used how we want them to be used.
Sure, I understand that's the goal, but there's a big bold note underneath grant reporting that says failure to submit an acceptable grant completion report by the required due date disqualifies the grantee from future grant application eligibility. That's a scary statement right there. You're saying you report to us number of people who traveled from 50 miles away, or you don't get any more money in the future. That's what the document is telling me. It's different than what you just told me.
I understand. I think a lot of, when you're looking at documents like this, you really need to make it clear to people that you have an expectation. So if it seems too harsh, we can modify, we can soften it.
Sure. I have one more question. So walk me through it. There's an application window, they apply, there's a subcommittee, final decision is on council?
No.
I haven't been able to find who makes this final decision.
Yeah, the Tourism Advisory Committee would review the final decision. And that seems to be a granting of authority. It seems to me that council should be
I guess they would be reviewing it, but yeah.
Sure, so the final decision as presented is to be that the committee that scores them actually decides who gets the grant monies, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
that's-
you guys would be
that's
deciding
fine.
the funding level, and then we were going to
Okay.
trust them to
I got it.
do the evaluation process and be able to assign that.
This is another, if I could, Mayor, I'm sorry, clear piece that's, for council discretion. We were using somewhat of the model of a couple of the other economic development grants that we already have. The storefront one, the security windows, there's a couple of others that are lower in grant value that prior councils had said, because those are at a smaller level, as long as the eligibility is clear and as long as the grant amount is at the lower level, then go for it, and so that it streamlines and it does make the process quicker. But clearly, if council wants to see all these, which we did set the minimum at $2,500, but they could come in at, what did we set the ceiling at?
At 10,000.
So, if you're thinking you want to see all of those applications, then we would package them together and probably just bring them all to you at once rather than sort of trickling them in. I mean, this is, again, just our experience in thinking about the process and having some other feedback.
Just if I could add on to that, based on the procurement policy, the 35,000 is well within a department director's spending limit as well as Aaron's.
DJ?
So with that comes another question. Has there been an outreach effort of any kind to recommend the 35,000? I mean, have you done any outreach to gauge the potential success of a program like this? Because we got maximum 10,000, we're talking 3 organizations, plus half of another one if we're utilizing maximum. I'm just curious how you came up with that number.
The 35,000, that was recommended by finance back in October, yeah. So we used that number.
So, same question to you, JC.
Yeah, so that was started based on where their fund balance was and where they started the year and not having too much spending at the time. And so if they fully expended all of their monies, this 35,000 would have allowed them to still have money left over for the next year to do the program and then the next year after that. So arbitrarily, it was kind of just plucked out from the beginning and as a good starting point, I guess, at this point.
The 2,500 was established, though, by the Tourism Advisory Committee. We originally recommended a $5,000 minimum, and they wanted to drop it down to make sure that it was accessible to other folks.
Valerie, do you still have a question?
No, I think it's probably just a discussion.
Okay, Vanessa?
In other cities that allowed businesses to participate, what kind of language did they use for qualified businesses? Was there any parameters, or was it just any licensed business?
They said that it needed to be a registered business, and it also needed to be a tourism-focused business.
Thank you.
Anything else? Questions? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this? Please step up, Doug.
The bionic man.
Tell us your name and who
Doug
you
Bradley
represent.
here representing the Tourism Advisory Council, and thank you. I'm kind of encouraged by the flexibility that I'm hearing from the council on opening things up a little more. I'm just here in support of the grant program. It was one of our primary goals that we presented, and just thank you guys for considering it. And certainly, we'd be willing to go back and look at some of the things that you've mentioned and make those changes. I think it would only help to promote tourism and make it more accessible to people that may use those funds wisely. So thank you.
Anybody else who wanted to speak on this? Step up, state your name, and let us know whether or not you live in the city. Mic might be off.
Okay. My name is David Dapper. I'm a citizen of Grants Pass. And I wonder how much it would do for tourism if our beautiful parks weren't homeless encampments with hundreds of needles laying around for kids to step on or pick up. And maybe if it was safe enough to have our concerts in the park. Just a thought.
Thank you. All right, let's keep our comments on this subject related to the grant program. We'll have time for other public comment later. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak on this? Step up, please.
Good evening, I'm Rebecca Anderson. I live in the county and my business is in the city. And I have served on the tourism board, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity to give seed money to organizations so that they have the opportunity to develop some new programs that will bring people into Grants Pass and help support the businesses here. I actually mentioned this to someone. We were having a conversation. I have deep roots from Hawaii, from my husband's side of the family, and there's a Lahau, which is a hula school here in town that probably a lot of people don't know about. You also have Ohana, 808 Ohana Grind, which does Polynesian food and so forth. Wouldn't it be fun if we could have a Polynesian festival here and bring in hula dancers from around the area, because you'd be amazed how many people are interested in that, and I don't think anybody else in the area is doing it. So something like this, I spoke with somebody who has a child in that school, and they're going to bring it up to the school and see if that's a possibility and get maybe some teams of dancers to come from other places. But it's just one thought as to the things that you can do when you have the funding to move these things forward. So I'm really excited about that. I think it's a neat idea, and I hope to see it bring some new and interesting prospective events into the town. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment and turn it back to council for discussion. Valerie.
Well, I just also want to add that when we created the DMO and we went through the change, one of the holes that was left was events. So we always knew we wanted to do something and to encourage events. And so this part of this program is to do that, is to fill that hole that says, yeah, you know, sadly we burnt our last tourism person out because he was trying to do it all, and that didn't work. He couldn't do the events and the promotion. So we learned from that experience, and that's why we formed the DMO. But we also, that kind of left that hole for events, and I think this does a nice job of filling that hole and to get, like I said, the sustainability going. So I really suggest that we do it. I would like to see a change, and so I guess I can make a motion to establish a grant program to help, and I just take out non-profit tourism-related organizations or to organizations to promote tourism in Grants Pass through a variety of promotional activities. I don't know where the motion is. So I move to adopt the resolution establishing a sustainable tourism grant program that includes organizations that just take out the nonprofit, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And just, yeah. So, did you get that?
Okay. Striking references to nonprofit.
Yeah, striking, yeah, the nonprofit part of it.
Okay, and was that seconded by Dwayne? Okay, thanks. Discussion on that motion. Joel? DJ?
Well, one of the things I think we need to do with all our committees, not just this one, I've noticed a tendency for nonprofits to have members on our committees. They may not even live in our county, and they're voting on things that their organization benefits from, funding-wise. And so they vote for it, and then they implement it, and they get the money. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but it does give an appearance of a conflict of interest, and we want to avoid that type of thing. So one of the things I would suggest is that at least the first year or 2 years that the committee recommends and then the council approves. Policy-wise, if we gave that to all our committees, I guarantee you somewhere along the line, we would lose control of that appearance of conflict of interest, or probably even run into a real conflict of interest. And it's nothing against the tourism committee, it's just good policy for accountability. And so I would encourage us to do that and have the committee do the staff work, to have their evaluation criteria, just like we do with the staff on other things that we purchase or buy or give a grant to. It just makes a lot of sense. Plus, it protects the members of the committee.
DJ's next, then Rob.
Sure, I agree. I think it should be final decision. I'd like to see this procedurally similar to other grant programs that we have. And adding tourism advisory for scoring, that would be great, but I think the ultimate decision needs to come down to elected officials. I'd like to open it for profits, but that's for-profit businesses. I'd also like to see this grant reporting to be not as oppressively burdensome, and the expectation of applicants providing actual data. I think that should be an ask, hey, this is part and parcel of the program, we'd really like that, but tagging it to statements of disqualification, I think is just a little bit too much. I'd like to see that change. And I'm not a huge fan of the open season approach. I do appreciate what you had said, expectations, there's a window of 3 months to apply, but I don't know if I agree with it being a seasonal approach. I think this should be just broad and open. We run out of money, we readdress. And the reason that is because I actually expect this program to be wildly successful. And I don't want to pigeonhole availability of these monies to tourism promotion. So for those reasons, unless amended, I'll be voting no. But it is because these changes, I think, are essential for a healthy program.
Rob?
Yeah, I agree with everything that DJ just said. I'm just not sure, well, I'm not sure if I understand the last thing you said. You said that it's limited to tourism promotion?
That was just a statement. It's just, yeah. Well, yeah, certainly appropriate use of TLT dollars. That was just a generalized end statement. That was just, what I meant to say, what my meaning was, is I expect this to be wildly successful for organizations, and we can stop there.
Okay. So, yeah, I agree with everything that was said. Basically, it's got to be made a little bit broader with including for-profits. It's the grant reporting criteria, while, you know, in a sense, it's a nice ideal. We were also told that, well, you know, it's just an ideal. We're just setting it out there, but we might not even, enforce it. So that basically means it shouldn't be there. It's either going to be hard and fast or it isn't, and I don't think it should be there to that, at least not written that way. I also have to wonder where would something fall that is beneficial for tourism but isn't necessarily a specific organized event. So, and the reason I bring that up, I think some of you know probably why I bring it up, is that at one point we were discussing potentially, I don't know if tourism friendly is right, but artwork, public artwork, murals specifically that could be really beneficial for tourism, but wouldn't necessarily be an event. They would be potentially very attractive. And I know that, like for instance, I don't know if, how many of you ever watch HGTV? Okay, my wife's addicted to HGTV. And I wish she would lose the addiction because it costs me money, because she wants to, everything she sees on HGTV, she'd like to try to emulate. But the point is that one of the more popular shows on HGTV now is called Hometown, and it's about Laurel, Mississippi. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that show. In Laurel, Mississippi, and you can look it up, Hometown, Laurel, Mississippi. But what this couple has done, they're into architecture and they're into remodeling and so forth. They'll take older homes. People are buying homes for $30,000, $35,000 and remodeling these homes. They're absolutely beautiful, restoring them, and all of a sudden the town has become really popular. One other thing that is really popular, and the woman, what's her name? Erin Napier is the host of the show. She said that murals in her town have made the town even more popular. And if you actually Google search murals in Laurel, Mississippi, there's a long line of murals, and apparently very, very beneficial for tourism there. And it's 2,000 miles away, and I'm talking about it. So that's how beneficial it could be. So I'm just wondering, because I know at one point, Aaron suggested to Ward Warren that new mural that he's got going, welcoming people to Grants Pass, could be a real benefit to tourism. Well, how would something like that be funded if it's only events? So I'm not sure what to do with that, whether we need to have a separate program that would cover that kind of thing, or if it would also be included in this kind of program. But I know that that particular, like for instance, that particular mural, the one that's now on the, it's not finished yet actually, but it's on the corner of 6th and E, that's going to be featured in Southern Oregon Magazine, and it's going to do nothing but draw people to Grants Pass. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, locals are going to like it, but it's going to be popular outside of Grants Pass. And, I know that magazine's requested pictures, and they're going to feature it. So that's a tourism draw. It's something that's positive. I don't see how it would be funded in something like this, and I wouldn't necessarily want to exclude it. So I'm not sure where we go with that. But there are other, in other words, if you're not at an event, it doesn't matter whether it's good for tourism or not. It wouldn't be funded by this. So, I think when I sent out an email to council, I gave the example of the most positive tourism-related art that we've ever had here was done by, Brady Adams with both the bears and the musical murals. Well, that wouldn't even qualify in this particular, it wouldn't fit any of the criteria, because it's not an event, it's not measurable, you can't measure overnight hotel stays, and so that would have been rejected because it wouldn't have fit any criteria, and yet we know, looking back, super popular and great for tourism. So I'd like to see a way for things like that to potentially be included for consideration for tourism-enhancing artwork that could also be underwritten by this grant. So I'm not sure where we go with that because it's not in this at all, but I think it's a glaring oversight or weakness that something like Brady Adams stuff wouldn't have been included. It couldn't have been included. That new mural that's going to be really popular. It's already popular. It's going to be written up in Travel Magazine. It also wouldn't be included. So I'm not sure where we go with that, but I like something, there needs to be a consideration and a way for something like that to apply as well.
Aaron's going to jump in on that.
So to respond to Councilor Pell's question, one thing that could be included then in the grant program is the true definition of tourism promotion as defined by Oregon Revised Statutes. And I'm just going to read that briefly because I think it catches the spirit of what Councilor Pell was talking about. Tourism promotion, which is what these dollars are meant to be utilized for, means the following activities: advertising, publicizing, and distributing information for the purposes of attracting and welcoming tourists. Now, before when we talked about, say, a mural that is welcoming individuals to Grants Pass, we believe that that would be an acceptable use because it is welcoming tourists. The other three items are conducting strategic planning and research necessary to stimulate future tourism development, operating tourism promotion agencies, and marketing special events and festivals designed to attract tourists. So primarily right now, the grant really is loaded on D, which is the marketing special events and festivals designed to attract tourists. But you could include A, B, and C. And again, A is advertising, publicizing, and distributing information for the purpose of attracting and welcoming tourists.
So I think under that definition, it would really need to be used for advertising that we have murals rather than creating a mural.
Well, I think it could be utilized if the mural is welcoming in nature, that it's part of that advertising. It's part of that advertising.
Wasn't the first part of the sentence was advertising, promoting, distributing information?
And welcoming tourists.
And welcoming, okay.
Because it has that and, I think it opens that up a little more.
Joel?
So remind me, I can't remember, the COPA got allocated some money. I think it was from tourism, wasn't it? Tourism dollars for grants, or? No. Well, it wasn't from tourism. Okay. So what I was thinking, following up on what Rob said, was under eligible project examples, and COPA would, and its organization would benefit from this also, is item F, just appropriate public art that serves that tourism need. And to me, that would be like that would even be the flowers in the alleyway.
So public art, general public art would not work under this
Under this?
specific.
But it has to have a
this is
certain
truly for
criteria,
This is for tourism promotion, and it is very specific. Now, you may be able to utilize some other dollars that are a little more free for that, but
Okay.
that would not, and a piece of artwork or an alleyway likely would not be considered a tourism-related facility. There's two definitions for tourism-related facility, which is what you're probably talking about. That's a conference center, convention center, or visitor information center, and/or other improved real property that has a useful life for 10 or more years and has a substantial purpose for supporting tourism or accommodating tourist activities.
I'm just
Okay.
going to re-clarify our clarification here, because the welcoming is important here. So it says advertising, publicizing, or distributing information for the purpose of attracting and welcoming tourists. So it really is advertising, publicizing, and distributing information. That's what the money can be spent on. So if you wanted to make, sell a TV commercial that shows Grants Pass's murals or artwork, I think that would be appropriate. But you can't create the art with the money. It needs to be advertising or publicizing that we have that art here.
May I have a suggestion? I might suggest, so we can continue to be efficient with your time and the public's time, et cetera, that it seems like there is not sufficient, there's more to explore with regards to the broadening of this grant program, both from, say, for instance, for-profit, nonprofits. We've gotten that information. We're also having a relatively good discussion on a broadening the potential use besides it just being marketing special events. It may be good use of time to go ahead and forward these type of recommendations to Tourism Advisory Committee to take a look at how they can broaden the use of this grant to bring back to you at a later date.
We do actually have a motion on the table, which was to approve adopt the resolution, but striking the references to the nonprofit. So is there further discussion on that? Shall we vote on the motion then? Do you have something, Valerie?
I just wanted to add, I do think the accountability piece in terms of having everything come before council could become very cumbersome because it slows a lot of things down. And I'm even thinking now, I know that the Porch Fest is kind of waiting to hear what this is going on and how they can apply for it because, their event is coming up soon, and so they're kind of wondering how it's going to be, how it works. And I understand that we need to be patient and get it right, but I also think that we need to not be as cumbersome either in terms of expecting everything to come before us. I can see them having to come and give us an annual update, if they're doing it annually, what they gave them to, but those are just my thoughts.
Other discussion before we vote? Joel?
Well, I'm going to be voting no on the motion, not because I don't support it, but I think we need to send it back to the Tourism Advisory Committee and make it even better. Just make it even better. Broaden it out a little bit, and it's not rocket science, I don't think, but it might be. I don't know. There's some communities that are better at it than others. So,
Rick, then Rob?
I agree with Joel. I think it'd be nice to have Tourism Advisory Committee provide more input. And one thing I would, if they're reviewing it too, I think having a seasonal time frame for the promotion could actually put a spotlight on it rather than just leaving it open all the time. Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think that it needs more cut and paste than we really should be doing tonight with it to do a good job with it. And I do want to get it done in time for Porch Fest or anyone else, and I'm hoping that staff can turn this around fairly quickly.
Anything further? All right, so the motion would be to approve the program as presented, except for striking the nonprofit restriction. And Valerie, how do you vote?
I'll vote yes.
Joel?
no.
Dwayne?
No.
Rick?
No.
DJ?
No.
Vanessa?
No.
And Rob?
No.
All right, motion fails 6-1. What are we going to do with it? Somebody want to make a motion for what we should do with it?
Okay, I move that we take it, have it go back in a timely manner to staff and the Tourism Advisory Committee to make the amendments and the adjustments that we talked about at tonight's meeting so that we can get it again soon.
Seconded by Dwayne. Any discussion on that? Okay. Valerie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
DJ?
Yep.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. All right, we'll have another round at that one. Next up, we had a change to the agenda, so make sure you're looking at the revised agenda that has a council action item D that would authorize the city manager to adjust the salary schedules for non-bargaining employees. And here is the city manager.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the public. As the mayor mentioned, in front of you today is council's consideration of a non-bargaining employee COLA, cost of living increase to the salary structure. What are we talking about when it comes to non-bargaining classification? We're really talking about approximately 55 staff members. We have about 250 so employees right now. These are the non-bargaining ones that are not in a bargaining unit. They represent individuals like you see here, the department directors, city attorney, other managers, supervisors, economic development coordinator, housing and neighborhood, along with some special classified employees that deal with bargaining, especially the HR department, et cetera. To give you some additional background on where we are today, and you do have some actions that are in front of you this evening that also may affect this, but non-bargaining employees traditionally do receive a cost of living adjustment historically on July 1 of each year, 2023. The city manager is not classified in the personnel rules, but also receives a COLA as the same as management. Police and fire represented employees received, and these are the bargaining units. The police union and the fire union, they did receive a 3% COLA on January 1, 2023. GPEA is to receive a 4% starting January 1, 2023, and that's scheduled for later on in your consent calendar for you to approve that, just to give you an idea of how the bargaining units have been moving. With the bargaining units moving, we've also had a discussion, which is scheduled for today's meeting, as a separate item, the police and fire non-bargaining to receive a 3% COLA on January 1st, 23, and a 1% COLA on July 1st, 23. Now, the reason why this one's separated different than the one we're discussing today, the one we're discussing right now is just a flat 4% starting July 1. The reason why police and fire are at a 3% and then a 1% is to help front load some of that COLA to deal with the compaction issue that we have. Because police and fire bargaining units were stepped up, the compaction between let's say a corporal and a sergeant are very close in range, and there's not many incentives to move up in the ranks due to the salaries being so close by. So providing a COLA early for police and fire at 3%, it keeps them in line and keeps that compaction from getting squished too much. Recommended 4% COLA effective July 1 for public safety non-bargaining would receive 1% is basically what I just explained there to you. Call to action is at council's discretion. It is scheduled for this evening, March 15th. The general fund with an estimated cost of $250,000, which includes wages and benefits for the upcoming fiscal year 24. So this would go into effect July 1, which is fiscal year 24. It does have other individuals besides just general fund, because you've got wastewater superintendents, et cetera. So it's general fund and enterprise funds that it is addressing. And your alternatives would be to authorize the city manager to implement the wage adjustments, to authorize the city manager to implement the wage adjustments as modified by council, do not authorize, And then there's a potential motion in front of you. And with that, Mayor, I turn it over for questions.
Council, what questions do you have? Rob?
So, was it slide 5? It says cost impact, general fund's estimated increase of $250,000, which includes wage and benefits for '24. So, the $250,000, I'm sorry, you broke it down really well, but I'm having trouble building it back up.
Sure, no problem.
So, the $250,000 total is what? What does that represent?
So $250,000 represents the total cost for non-bargaining, which includes police, fire, and then general fund, along with enterprise fund supervisors. And that represents about 55 employees.
Okay, thank you.
And of the 55 employees, approximately, I think around 20 are public safety, 19 maybe.
I don't remember the public safety number, but over half are in the general fund,
Yeah.
which most of that's public safety.
So do we have any idea of those 55, how many of them would also be getting step increases this year?
We don't, because those are merit-based, so there are situations and times when that is definitely not a guarantee. That's based on merit. And if you're a performer or a top performer, you are able to get a step increase, but if you don't meet one of those criteria, then you do not get a step increase.
So how many might be eligible for a step increase this year?
Over the period of fiscal year '24, you would be looking at all 55 that would, well, no,
Unless they
because
were
there's some that are
topped
topped out.
Right.
JC might be able to get that for you, because
Give
we
me-
do have
give
some
me
that
a
are
little
topped
bit.
out, and so they would not be eligible for a step, they would only be eligible for a COLA. So we'll try and get that number for you.
So can you give us just a rough idea, as a percentage, people that are eligible for step increases, how many of them usually achieve that or usually are granted a step increase?
There's a good percentage
Ballpark.
that do get, if they're eligible, that do get a step increase. But it's not 100%. And I don't have that percentage in front of me.
Okay. So some employees, of those 55, a good percentage could be getting 8% increase this year, the 4 plus a 4% step increase.
Yes,
That'd be
and
right.
that is the same for your bargaining units also, that you're awarding the COLAs to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Rick, then Val?
Near and don't I also remember when we had the review of this earlier and approved the amount that's being put forward is to maintain people to be within a comparable salary range for their position?
Yes, there are two issues right now, and Councilor Pell was touching on those. One is the salary structure that we have in place with the steps associated with them, and those are based on merit. And if you are a performer or top performer within a year's period, you have the ability, if you're not topped out, to take a step up. That's different than COLA, which is associated with other external factors when it comes to inflation, et cetera, and the COLA. The COLA is not directly related to performance or the salary structure. So this is just keeping in line with the other bargaining units, what they've received from a COLA also, to deal with what you're talking about, the compaction issue with the union represented employees, colleagues, and then also the non-bargaining, which are not represented.
So, but what I'm trying to clarify is when we look at all that, we're also looking at other cities in the state of Oregon and see what that position or that occupation, whether you're a fireman or policeman, is bringing, so we maintain our current staffing at relatively competitive levels. Isn't that true?
So two things. We're looking from a COLA perspective, we're looking at what the average COLA is, the CPI, et cetera, and I think that was like 8.2 and 7.9 if you look at those. So it's an average of about 8%. And that's not what you've been granting in the collective bargaining agreements, which have been around 3 to 4%. And that's not what we're asking here for also to deal with the compaction issue to keep everything the same. The issue that you talked about, comparators with other communities, that deals with the salary structures associated with each position. Firefighter, an engineer, a lieutenant, a battalion chief. Those are all studied with your neighboring communities and communities that are like size, plus or minus 5. And we do studies on those on a regular basis. And one of the things we did discuss and that we are recommending is we haven't done one for about 10 years. So it's time now from a non-bargaining perspective for us to do a study and update our salary schedule for the non-bargaining. Those updates on the salary schedules are done usually every period when it comes to collective bargaining agreements. So when you're looking at a fire union or police union or Teamsters or GPA, both sides are looking at what your comparators are, and you're establishing a structure associated with that, and you're establishing a new salary schedule based on your competitors. We have not done that for non-bargaining for a number of years, so that's one of the things we'd like to do in fiscal year 24.
Thank you.
JC?
So I'm guessing this has to do with the recent change to moving it from 7 steps to 10, but there are 0 in 2024 that will not, won't be capped out. But actually, there are 6 people that do cap out within the year, and so this will be their last step.
Thank you, JC. Hacksaw.
I have a question. I didn't understand on the cost impact. Is $250,000 the total cost impact, or is that just the cost impact to the general fund?
That's the total cost impact.
Okay.
About half of that is general fund.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? Val?
Yeah, I think I'm getting it. I just want clarification. So the CPI this year was 8%, basically.
Yeah.
The bargaining units didn't get that 8%, right?
We were at 3 to 4 range.
Right, 3 to 4%. And so basically what we're doing is we're really dealing mostly with the compaction issue, because it's a non-bargaining people who go bargaining are automatically coming up, and so they're coming up to the bottom, and so the people who are non-bargaining are making the same as those people that have moved up, and that's what compaction means, is that suddenly the people that are at the top aren't making any more money than the person who moved their way through the steps. I'm just kind of clarifying compaction. So that's where the people that are just moving up, the people that are non-bargaining don't have that opportunity to move up in that way. And so we're just kind of stepping in and saying, yes, you certainly deserve that in a sense as well. Am I correct?
So I painted a Picasso, you just painted a Rembrandt.
Okay.
So you did a good job in
Okay.
explaining that.
Okay, well, like I said, because I know, when, it gets out there, it looks, can you believe they're paying these people this much money? But you're looking at some of the top people that are doing all the hard work. And so it's kind of like, to me, it's kind of a non-brainer that those are the people that you want to work and you want to honor. So I just want clarity on that we are not giving them the full 8%. That some of them through steps can get there, but they are getting basically what the bargaining units have been given.
Yes, it's 2 separate issues.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? Please step forward and state your name and let us know whether or not you live in the city.
Hi, my name is Julie Hartford, and I live in the city of Grants Pass, and I would like to encourage the council to approve this. I know, as you are well aware, that Grants Pass and Josephine County also have a reputation for paying low wages to the city employees, and we certainly are very lucky that we have such good ones, and I'd like to encourage you to approve this. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment and turn it over to council for discussion. Dwayne?
This is a tough one for me because I feel every one of these people deserve a raise, and I do support what she just says, but like I said on Monday, ever since I've been on council in the 2.5 months, all we do is spend money, and we're coming up on budget problems because we keep kicking this down the road of not getting our budget together, and here we are spending another, more money, and I feel this should be pushed till next year after we've figured out our budgeting to pay for law enforcement, paying for, we need more more officers, and not that, again, not that these people don't deserve it, they do. But people before me have put us in this predicament of keeping using the general fund to just keep milking it dry, and that is a problem with me, and I just have a hard time keep spending money. We're going to go back to the public and say, hey, we need more money to support this. Well, we want to raise your water rates, or we want to get your payroll tax, blah, 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 and it's just, it doesn't sit well with me to keep asking for money. Now, if we already asked for money and people want to give us the money and we want to go ahead and give them 10% raises, sure, let's give them 10% raises. But I think the people need to weigh on this and fix our problems first.
Rob, then Joel.
In terms of the,
It was Rob, then Joel.
oh, Rob, I'm sorry, go
That's
ahead,
okay.
Rob.
Hey, Kit.
These are the Bobbsey twins. In terms of a 3% or 4% salary increase, that's really reasonable. The issue is not this, in my mind. I think that if there's going to be any point of discussion, it's the amount of and frequency of step increases over time and retention. And the way we've done that, the city has done that, and I would guess some of it's in union contracts, so it's going to be dealing in bargaining in good faith, whatever. That's where, if we were going to make any adjustments, I think we would need to make adjustments in the future. And you'd still have 10 steps, but then they would be phased in probably at a first 3 years every year, second 3 years every 2 years, third. After that, then another 3 step increases where you top out, but it's every 3 years. But I don't know in terms of the other cities and how that looks. That would be the point of discussion from my perspective, not a 3% raise from this year to next year. I'm kind of embarrassed to say my Social Security increased 8%, so, and the young people out there working are paying it. So thank you.
Rob.
Yeah, this is, I can echo Dwayne's sentiments, because this is definitely not an easy, it's not a simple thought process for me. Some people might not believe it, but I like to try to be fair, and I understand about compaction, and it's reasonable that a supervisor would be making more than the people under them and all that. I look at this, this one part of it, this little segment, this slice of the pie is 3 or 4%. Actually, it was even divided up. It's 3% plus 1% plus another 4%. So now we're talking 8%. And to me, we're just adding, another 2 cars to the train that is heading towards, a derailment, as we know. And we don't necessarily have an answer to our budget problems. We're still even asking questions. So it really, and it's been this way, it was 2008 in the summer. I was on the front page of the Courier, and it said, government skeptic is concerned that government spending is unsustainable. And it was a long article. And okay, it's been that way since, and we do nothing really to change it. We do nothing to really, bargain, 2 years between steps or whatever. It just continues and it continues and it continues to get more and more unsustainable. And right now, as of Monday, I think that almost everybody who was watching that meeting or was in that meeting understands that we've got almost no discretionary money at all anymore. So it's really, really concerning to me that we would essentially give people 8% raises, and I understand about compaction, and I understand all that, and I understand the other groups got it, and that's the other part of the problem, is always going to be one group has gotten it, or we need more for valid reasons, but we also get to the point where we have no more money, and we're looking to give 8% raises, and I have a real problem with that, because it's just continued. There's been no steps backwards, or been no tapping the brakes that I've been able to see. Well, I shouldn't say that. There may have been 1 year where I think non-bargaining didn't take the COLAs. That may have been a couple years ago with COVID. Other than that, in the last 15 years, there's been very little tapping of the brakes, and now we're out of money. So I got a problem with essentially giving 8% raises to people in the organization this year.
Aaron?
I just wanted to make a correction. It's 4%, which is in front of you today from a COLA perspective. And
yeah, from a COLA perspective, I understand, but it's 4 plus 3 plus 1. And so from a marketing perspective, saying 4% is great. From a reality perspective, it is 8%, and that's what I have the problem with.
No, so I need to clarify that. It's 4% for non-police and fire non-bargaining July 1, 24. It's 3% for public safety, police and fire, January 1, 23, and then an additional 1% for them only come July 1, 2024. Therefore, you're dealing with the immediate compaction with the two bargaining units and police and fire now, because they've been retroed, or they will be after tonight's meeting when you take a look at the consent calendar, retroed. Some of them will be retroed from January 1. So it's not an addition of all of those. You're just dealing with police and fire, public safety first, and then they're getting a 1% when the rest of the non-bargaining, like your water, wastewater, some administration, et cetera, are getting the 4%. So it's 4%.
Just want to clarify, you said 2024, but I believe it's July of 2023. It's just the beginning of fiscal year 24.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was thinking fiscal year 24 budget. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Additional discussion? We don't have a motion, so. Valerie?
I move to authorize the city manager to adjust the salary schedules for the non-bargaining employees.
Is there a second? Joel? Any discussion on the motion there?
I'm just going to agree with what Joel said. I think that, to give the brunt to some of the highest and most qualified people we have is not the answer. I do understand that we are out of money. I do understand that we have some issues, but I don't know that this is the answer. I think the answer is through the step system, or, looking at the whole picture. So those are my thoughts.
DJ?
Yeah, I'd be remiss not to just mention that. I think that we are all kind of aligned in our thought processes that we are virtually out of general fund money, like virtually there. We got $150,000, $200,000-ish in general fund monies. Not pursuing this, I don't think is the answer, but we need to reflect that we're all cognizant of that disaster that we are in right now. Like, we are in it right now. Deferring this decision or not doing this, I don't think that's going to prevent a disaster that we're already experiencing with the general fund and public safety revenues. We need to focus our attention on those things. Dwayne, you're right. We are out of general fund money, and that's just, those are just the facts. So, but yeah, we need to support our employees the best way we can, and this is a good way to do it.
Joel?
Well, and the other thing that, having worked with government for 40-some years, I'm not that old, it's hard for government to say no. And so people come to you with different problems. They come to you with feral cats. It's a great idea. It's out of the general fund. They come to you with, we need a crosswalk. That's not out of the general fund. It'll be another place. But it's hard for your elected constituency to say, no, you can't have that because we can't afford it collectively. Government does not do a good job of that. So that's something we're going to have to learn to do for the fiscal benefit of our future. Not for us, but for you and your children. We have to learn to say no, and that's tough.
Any further discussion? All right, so the motion was to authorize the salary schedule adjustment for the non-bargaining employees. And Valerie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Dwayne,
No.
Rick,
Yes.
DJ,
Yes.
Vanessa,
Yes.
Rob.
No.
Motion passes 5-2.
Next on the agenda.
All right. Next up, we have an appointment related to our Tourism Advisory Committee. We have 3 openings on the committee, and 5 candidates have applied, but the qualifications for this committee, it says they will include preferably 2 members representing lodging properties within the city of Grants Pass, and others who represent river guides, area attractions, realtors, restaurants, the media, marketing, and citizens at large. So of these 5 candidates, 1, Rebecca Anderson, is reapplying, and she does represent a lodging property owner. And then for the position B, which is kind of more general tourism and marketing related positions, we have 4 applicants. Courtney Collins, Winnis Grow is reapplying for the committee, Michael O'Coin, and Samantha Rush. And the committee's recommendation is that Rebecca and Winnis have a strong proven track record of being on the committee and contributing. And Michael O'Coin, they think he will bring good experience and will be a positive contributor and active member. So if you would all pass your purple sheets down this way.
Just to let you know, 2 of them over here, because there's 3 openings. Sorry. Okay, it's all good.
I'm going to open public comment, and we will come back to this after I tally things up. So regarding public comment, this is an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on items not related to a public hearing or council action item before the council tonight. The intent is to provide information that is pertinent to the city's jurisdiction. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the council as one body, not to individuals. At the conclusion of public comment, council will have an opportunity to respond. This meeting will proceed in an effective and courteous manner. Citizens and council members will be allowed to state their positions in an atmosphere free from slander, threats, or other personal attacks. Signs or placards, outbursts of applause, campaigning for public office, and other disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. And so when you come up, there's a green light. You have 3 minutes, and once the yellow light comes on, you have 30 seconds left. First up, Julie Hartford.
Thank you. I'm Julie Hartford from Grants Pass. This last Wednesday, I was part of a group which included some members of PATH who had a very informative meeting with the Grants Pass Police Department. As part of PATH, we're looking for positive solutions to the homeless problem here in town. Police Chief Hensman was very attentive and thoughtful when we shared our vision at PATH, and he shared with us the police department's roles, responsibilities, and the challenges that the police department faces as they address the homeless in our town. We had an open dialogue discussing ways that we can support each other's efforts. I personally feel like the police department is doing as much as they can given their limited budget, the limits of the injunction, the state and local laws regarding camping in parks, and their need to balance the safety of all the community members, including the officers and themselves. The laws regarding moving people out of the parks and the requirements regarding moving things out of the park and the complaints of neighbors and tax-paying citizens regarding transients in the parks, and the officers' desires to help those they can. It's a long list, a lot they're juggling. I walked away feeling like we are such a lucky community to have these officers watching over us. Sorry. Our officers are really where the rubber meets the road on the homelessness situation. I would like to publicly thank them, and I would like to ask the City Council or tell you how lucky we are to have them and especially Chief Hinsman, and hopefully we will do everything we can to keep him. He's a fabulous police chief, and I just want you to know how well he represents the city. Thank you.
Thank you. David Dapper?
I also really appreciate what the police do, keeping it just livable around our parks. And they're starting fires at night. I took pictures. We're going to end up like the next Phoenix or Talon if we don't do something at some point. And we don't need $1 million for somebody to run it right now. We need to set aside a piece of property that everyone can agree on, and no one seems to have a problem with the lot across it from the Youth Authority. However, we'll need a waiver because of the school and the Youth Authority, but they're not climbing the fence to break into it. And we don't need everything all at once. We need to make decisions and pick a piece of property first. That's something, we can do for free. Just talk about it and, come up with some ideas. Anyway, please, we need it. Like I say, tourism. Tourist comes here to do something in Riverside Park, and they look at that and they think, I'm not going there. I mean, we won't go there. So please, something.
Is Emma Black here?
Good evening, Grants Pass City Councils and Mayor Bristol. My name is Emma Black, and I'm requesting to speak to you today as a Grants Pass resident, voter, homeowner, mother of 2 young children, and concerned citizen. My family and I moved to this beautiful town 5 years ago, seeking a family-friendly place to live. We love our neighborhood and intend to stay in this community, working, playing, and putting down roots. In the 5 years I've lived here, it is increasingly evident that there is a huge issue with homelessness in this city. I often hear that homeless people are taking over the parks, and my fellow parent friends are concerned about the safety of their children going there. What is less known and obvious is why people are becoming and staying homeless, and what the city is actively doing to address this critical issue. This winter, the United Community Action Network, or UCAN, received funding from the city to open an emergency warming shelter. I was able to volunteer at the warming shelter a few times, and what I saw was eye-opening, alarming, and inspirational. 45 to 60 people filled the old DMV site every night, extremely grateful for a safe space to sleep, eat food, use the restroom, and talk to each other, and the incredible staff, security guards, and volunteers. This low-barrier shelter option allowed people to come with their pets as couples or families with bikes and other belongings, and didn't require a drug or alcohol screening. Many of the guests were women, teenagers, extremely elderly, and had intensive medical needs. Their reasons for becoming homeless varied, but their vulnerability and gratitude were unforgettable. UCAN deserves huge kudos for how the shelter was operated and received. Its success speaks to the urgent need for more low-barrier shelter options in this city, including a homeless shelter, navigation center, field outreach workers, safe parking and camping sites, and the development of as much low-income housing as possible. The amount of people seeking shelter debunks the myth that people who are homeless don't want help. They absolutely do, and they need help that is provided with respect and empathy now more than ever. I extend my gratitude to Mayor Bristol for vetoing the strategic plan that eliminated key priorities to assist the unhoused, and I urge the city to develop a comprehensive support strategy for the hundreds of people living unhoused and unsheltered in this beautiful city. Any proposed strategy should include options for volunteer opportunities to reduce the isolation and stigmatization of people living unhoused. Doing nothing will not prompt people to move to another city for more support. Many of the folks I met at the shelter are longtime residents, employees of local businesses, and love this community. They simply cannot afford a home to live in here. So they are sheltering in tents at parks, sleeping in cars along roads, and tucked under awnings of businesses, attempting to stay warm and dry in our increasingly harsh winters. The safety and vitality of our community depends on acting now. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek Horning?
Hi, thank you, council members. I'm Derek Horning. I grew up here, born and raised. I've been in California for about 20 years or so. Just moved back up, and for the last 4 months I've spent the majority of my time, actually every single day, down at the parks, working with people. I counted it up today. I've transported 163 people who were forced to move tents, given a 3-day eviction. So it is a big problem that we do not have a location where we can put people, where they can be safe, because when they get moved, all their stuff gets thrown away. And that is their entire life. Imagine everything you had in your life, in your house, just gets tossed. And I would just suggest to the council that we try to be proactive, not reactive. Because the average cost with reaction is $30,000 per homeless person, per a study of last year. And when you're proactive, it's $10,000. And that includes the medical costs, the AMR, the Narcan, all the visits to the doctor, the food, everything. So it is much more efficient to jump out ahead of the problem than to let it get too far. And I completely understand needles in parks and all that, but we work with Martha's Kitchen, we get the dispensers, we do our best for that, and for the most part, the majority of the unhomed apply, and they're good with it. But like any program, like anything you do, not everyone is going to be all in all the time. You're always going to have some failures. But it's something that is very passionate to me, just spending so much time on the ground. Like I said, I spend every day down there, giving rides and taking them to the store with their food car, getting them to DHS, to Adapt, to Insight, to Choices, DoorCan. And those are great services. But we don't have a centralized setup for those to be pursued. So it's basically, if they just get lucky enough to run into me or one of the other volunteers, then they get the chance. Other than that, they're on their own. And left to their own devices, yeah, they're probably going to make a bad mistake. That's just how it is. I made plenty. I was an addict and an alcoholic. I made plenty of horrible choices in my life. So I know what it's like. And these aren't bad people. These are the best people I know. So, thank you very much, Mayor.
Vivian Pilger, or Kirkpatrick Pilger?
Good evening. At 11 o'clock this morning, my husband and I brought our 3 dogs into the vet over on Lincoln. We live up on Mount Baldy, and we went by Morrison Park. We went by Morrison Park, and there was a bunch of tents there. We left our house at 11 a.m. I thought they were supposed to be cleared out by a certain time. I'm not sure of all the various rules about it. As we went down Rogue River Highway, there were 2 people on the corner of Park and Rogue River Highway sitting on the benches with a bunch of bags and eating some food and doing some stuff. And they appeared to be homeless. We turned right, I think it was on Park, and behind the Fruitdale Grange, there was apparently a homeless man with his bike parked there with a bunch of bags hanging off it, and he was laying flat on his face, hugging those car stop things, the curbs thingies that stop cars. And he was just laying there. And then we came in and crossed 7th Street Bridge and saw several tents still up in the park. On our way home around 2 p.m., We passed several tents next to the 6th Street Bridge. We went, saw several strolling homeless people on 6th Street. Went back by Centennial Park, again, lots of trash, lots of tents. And on the corner of Park and Rogue River Highway, there were still homeless people hanging out there. At 4:45 tonight, I was coming home from a meeting, or I was coming into town to go to a meeting, and I went by Centennial Park, and again, there was the tents. And still on the corner of Rogue River and Park, there were people sitting on the benches there. And then I crossed over, and in Riverside Park, still more tents. So I came here for 10 years before I moved up here. I never saw this. I came up in the 90s, and then we moved up, well, in the 2000s, I should say. We moved up here in 2010. This wasn't that way then, and I know a lot has changed in the world since then. And we have a big problem here, but I don't think it's in our best interest to make Grants Pass a welcoming place for the homeless to come to, because we offer so many services. Because if you offer it, they will come. Thank you. Oh, I have 28 seconds. I should fill that. Yes, I'm just dismayed because my husband and I, at our age, we're almost 70, and we're thinking of moving to another state so that we won't be fearful coming into town. I work actually across the street at a small building, and one day I had 2 homeless people. One came in and just screamed at me in the front door, and another one was asleep in the planter underneath the window, and the police came and arrested him. Seconds up.
Is there anyone else here tonight who wanted to speak? No? Okay, we'll close public comment. Council, did anyone want to respond to anything? Dwayne?
Seems to be a little confusion on the ordinances or laws, so I'm just going to go ahead and read them, because we hear this every time. Move them to a piece of property, or there's people putting out false information about the injunction and the law, HB, went to 3115. So the injunction says basically, I'm going to paraphrase this, they get time to rest in the park. They get time to rest. We cannot move them while they rest. And those hours, I don't have them in front of me, but they're in the evening. I actually wrote to the courier this. So they get to rest, so we cannot move them. The states tell us we can't move them for 72 hours after that. So nowhere in the injunction or the law does it say if you open a shelter, urban campground, or nothing, that these people will not be able to sleep in the park. So I want to make that very clear to people. No matter what we do, if they want to rest in the park, they'll be able to rest in the park. That's not our law. That's the state's law, and that's the injunction. So when people tell us, go open a shelter, blah, 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 which we have no money, they're going to rest somewhere. And nowhere in the injunction says people cannot go to the Gospel Rescue Mission. It just says it's a religious one that can't be used as a low barrier. It's still there. There's 35 men beds today and 40 women. So if someone wants a bed, there's a bed there available. That's what I got to say.
Anybody else? Vanessa?
I still don't quite understand how anyone can say that for the issue of homelessness, if you build it, they will come, because this council has done nothing about homelessness. And we have homelessness in this community, so don't quite understand that. We only have one low barrier shelter with a wait list of over 100 people on it. And of course, we do have the Gospel Rescue Mission that does great work there, but that's not the end-all be-all solution. We need more availability of these types of services, these centralized services, not only because it's the humane response to the collective issue that we're facing up and down the West Coast, but it's because it's clearly what this community wants us to do. Time and time again, they've asked us to take action in this way. So I hope that it eventually sinks into the council that this community would like us to move forward with some type of navigation center, urban campground, homeless shelter that is expanded from 22 to 25 beds. So please hear those concerns tonight, council.
Anybody else? Valerie?
I just want to add that I think if you do read tonight's paper, that there is hopefully money coming down to build housing and help us, as we've talked to tonight. Part of the problem that we have is that we don't have a lot of money. So we are hoping that some of the money that is prioritized from Salem will come down and allow us to provide some of those services.
Anybody else? All right, Karen, how about the emails?
So there were 2 emails that disagree with the decision by council to allow feeding of cats in the park, 2 upset with homelessness in city parks, and 1 against establishing a low barrier shelter.
Thank you. All right, let's jump back to appointments for the Tourism Advisory Committee. So it was unanimous. We had 7 people here had circled nods for Rebecca Anderson, Winnis Grow, and Michael O'Coin. DJ.
Move to appoint as presented.
Seconded by Val. Any discussion on that? Okay, so the motion would be to appoint Rebecca Anderson, Winnis Grow, and Michael O'Coin. DJ, how do you vote?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. All right. Now, back to consent agenda. And these are items considered to be of such routine nature without controversy that they may be approved in a single action. And is there still a request to make changes to this? Yeah, Vanessa?
I did have one minor edit that I emailed to Karen. My apologies, I emailed that late to you again. So if we could include that as well. It's very minor. It's removing on page 170 for the Tourism Advisory Committee. I believe it's removing Kurt Collins as the council liaison.
Okay. So that would be in their minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Joel?
I would request that the strategic plan, we have a short presentation on that or a discussion on that, and then we can keep it on the consent agenda.
Tonight? Okay. So Joel is wanting to have a presentation about it, or do you have just a discussion?
I just wanted a short discussion on it before we have it on the consent agenda.
Okay. Are there any other changes? Okay, let's go ahead with the discussion about the strategic plan. What did you have? Yes.
Okay, so at our last meeting, we had some consensus, which I thought was good, but we also had people talking past each other and not hearing each other. And that has happened before on the council, and it has led to unresolved conflict. That is not good for the future of the city, for the homeless, or for all our constituents. And so I'd just like to clarify what I saw when people were talking past each other, and it was council members, and this is from my perspective, it's not from other people's perspective, you may have a different perspective. My own position was, given our budget situation, we cannot invest the city resources that we have that are already allocated to police, to infrastructure, to the swimming pool, to whatever, to fund the issue in question in terms of the urban campground and the parking. Then Brian talked about, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, so if I don't get this quite right, somebody correct me, said, well, he doesn't support operational expenses and has never supported that. Whether it's the position that I had, and it's still in conflict, is even the capital investments, the structure, the city, from the existing budgets that we have today, cannot afford to purchase additional land or whatever without some of the money that the governor has just recently allocated. And I don't think, we spoke past each other. I think all parties want to get along. They all want to solve the homeless issue. And we all want to do it in a fiscally responsible manner. But I needed to point that out and not ignore that, because I think we ignored it at the last meeting and we spoke past each other. And I don't think that's healthy. So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay. Any other discussion? Dwayne?
I was going to make my comments, and we're going to continue on. So I just think there's three things on the strategic plan that we should focus on. I'm going to repeat these three: public safety, water treatment facility, and housing. We don't have any money for anything else. So I'll be voting no tonight because there's things on there we can't afford. They're all dream lists. And we need to rein back our spending and thoughts. I know we were told to the moon's the sky, or whatever you want to say, and that's not true. We need to get back to reality and rein things back in. And some of those things fall under housing, some of those things fall under public safety, but those are the three main things that every person in this community needs, not just 3% of the population. 97%, 100% need public safety, housing, and water. That's all.
Anybody else? Okay. Valerie, would you please read the consent agenda?
Yes. Item A, resolution authorizing the city manager to adjust the salary schedules for public safety, non-bargaining supervisory and management employees and update the non-bargaining handbook. Item B, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 3-year labor contract with the Grants Pass Employee Association. C, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the Clyde Place Sewer and Water Main Replacement Project, number SE 6375. D, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the Allen Creek Property Demolition and Cleanup Project, number TR 6116. F, motion approving the minutes of the city council meeting of March 1st. Then there's a motion acknowledging the minutes of the Collaborative Economic Development Committee for January 26th and February 10th. A motion acknowledging the Bikeways and Walkways, January 10th. Urban Area Planning Commission, January 25th. Historical Buildings and Sites, January 19th. Parks Advisory Committee, January 12th. Urban Tree Advisory Committee, January 9th. Housing Advisory Committee, January 20th. Tourism Advisory Committee, February 7th. And the resolution adopting the city's strategic plan for 2023. And with that, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda for March 15th, 2023.
Seconded by Rick. All right. Valerie, on the consent agenda, how do you vote?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Dwayne?
No.
Oh, hang on.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask Councilor Lovelace, would you consider
Amended as yes, amended.
with the minor edit? Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay. The motion was amended to include the minor edit on Kirk Collins. Okay. Valerie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Dwayne?
No.
Rick?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
And Rob?
Yes.
Consent agenda passes 6-1. And matters from Mayor Council, do you have anything you wanted to bring up tonight? Valerie?
I do have a couple things. Number one of the things that we have talked about in the past, and I really want to get on this because we've talked about it at strategic planning, and that was putting together a subcommittee for the evaluation process for the city manager. And I'm just afraid if we kick it down and we keep kicking it down the road, we'll never actually formulate and put that together. So I would like to see that come forward. I don't know if we, just want to make sure that if you're interested in being on that committee, you email me or whatever, and then we'll start putting that together. Because I do want to I want to be on top of it. I don't want to wait another year and say, we should have done it again. So I want to do that. So I wanted to bring that up. And I have another thing I'm going to bring up, that the Transportation Committee Draft 2427 STIP which is a State Transportation Improvement Plan for the years 24 through 27, is just being put together right now. And this is when we really need to look at it, because like everybody else, budgetary issues are, everybody's budget's getting smaller and smaller, and the needs are bigger and bigger. And there's a couple of things on this draft STIP that will mean a lot to us. One of them is Highway 199. There's a $1 million project to make a turn lane on US 99 at Elliott Creek Road, a left turn lane to help with the safety on Highway 199. And this to me is a bigger one. And this is a Lincoln Road, turning that into a multimodal, making it a wider street with bicycle lanes so that loop can happen, because that Lincoln Road is a big hole. That would also help open area, I think, for housing if we had a wider arterial road out there. So it is an $8.5 million program that is on the STIP plan under Safe Routes to School and Pedestrian Bike Strategic Funding. So it has been vetted. It's really, the county and the city went together and asked for that project. And so there's a whole lot of projects for all over, but some of them will be cut. So this is a time they have an open house between now and April 28th. So I'm going to send you the link so that you can go on and add some comments, and I'm just going to try to get it out there. I think it'd be a really good thing for the Bikeways and Walkways Committee to get a hold of and know that it's there, so we can get as much support locally to help bring some of those funds to our community.
Dwayne?
I would hope that time is ticking. HB 3115 actually takes effect on July 1st, and I know we're supposed to look at our ordinances to deal with the park. Eugene, Springfield, they're doing theirs right now. They're having talks about it. It was in the Register Guard, and I think that we cannot keep pushing this off, even though there is a lawsuit pending, but we are instructed from the state to look at those and make changes and adjustments. And also, working with law enforcement, we need to make better ordinances to help our law enforcement so they can enforce things fairly, and instead of them just making judgments and hoping they're doing what we ask them to do. Thank you.
Anybody else tonight? All right. Staff?
Just want to give kudos to council. We had a lengthy discussion about the housing production strategy, and I can appreciate council's comments about, what's innovative, what do we need to digest this some more. And I think some of that desire that I've heard from council, and I know some of that desire that I heard from council comes from the fact that we are implementing so many of those items that are on the list that was a lot of resources were spent to come up with this plan. So just want to give you kudos because you're ahead of the game in a number of those items, and we are actively pursuing those even though they're recommended in the plan. So thank you, council.
Anybody else tonight? All right. What's next? Val?
I make a motion to adjourn.
All right. Seconded by Rick. All in favor of adjourning tonight, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Nope. All right. Hey, we didn't even make it to 9, but we are adjourned, and I'll see you.
Rick's disappointed.
I don't think we have anything till April. Do we have anything until April? I don't know. We have another meeting.